The stakes escalated when I discovered his connection to a city councilman, a man named Alistair Vance, who was the chair of the committee overseeing tech zoning and subsidies. Their encrypted messages spoke of favorable rulings and lucrative city contracts in exchange for discreet campaign contributions funneled through a nonprofit. This was no longer just corporate betrayal. This was corruption, the kind that could land people in a federal prison. It was the lever I needed. I began to craft my masterpiece, a digital Trojan horse I called Lament Configuration. It was a piece of code so elegant, so malicious, it was almost beautiful. Disguised as a routine security update for Ethelgard's flagship data analytics platform, it would lie dormant inside the systems of every one of his clients. Banks, government agencies, Fortune 500 companies. On my command, it wouldn't destroy or steal data. Instead, it would begin a slow, inexorable corruption, introducing tiny, almost imperceptible errors into financial forecasts, logistical models, and risk assessments. The flaws would be small at first, a decimal point shifted here, a demographic category mislabeled there. But over days and weeks, the errors would compound, creating a cascade of faulty intelligence that would lead to catastrophic business decisions. It was a poison pill for his entire empire, and his clients would willingly swallow it, trusting in the Ethelgard brand. Planting it required me to physically breach his fortress. The Ethelgard headquarters was a temple of modern security. Biometric scanners, keycard access, motion sensors. But I knew its heart because I had helped design its security protocols. I knew about the maintenance conduit that ran behind the server room on the 45th floor, a relic from the building's construction that had been grandfathered into the new designs. On a night when a tropical storm was lashing the city, its fury providing the perfect auditory cover, I slipped inside. The parking garage was dim, the concrete walls sweating with humidity. The air was thick with the smell of wet tires and ozone. I moved like a shadow past the security desk, using a cloned keycard from a janitorial service I'd spent months infiltrating. The elevator ride was a study in silent tension, my own breath loud in the sterile silence. The conduit was exactly where I remembered, a tight, dusty space filled with the thrum of high-voltage cables and fiber optic lines. I crawled through the darkness, the world narrowing to the circle of light from my headlamp, until I found the access panel for the primary server rack. My fingers flew across a portable keyboard, bypassing firewalls and installing my creation deep within the core programming. The whole operation took less than 10 minutes. As I slipped back out into the storm-swept night, the rain feeling like a baptism, I knew the die was cast. His kingdom was now my puppet. The final act required a stage. The annual Ethelgard shareholder meeting was held at the Mandarin Oriental, a gathering of the city's financial elite. It was where Julian would stand before his investors, his board, and the press to present a triumphant year-end report, to bask in the glory of his perceived invincibility. I put on the one good suit I still owned, a relic from my former life that hung a little loose on my frame. Walking into that ballroom was like stepping into a memory of a life that no longer belonged to me. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and ambition. Giant screens displayed the Ethelgard logo, and the murmur of 100 conversations was a symphony of wealth and power. I took a seat at the back, hidden in the crowd. When Julian took the stage, he was the picture of restored confidence, his smile back, his suit impeccable. He spoke of growth, of innovation, of a future brighter than anyone could imagine. He was a master orator, weaving a narrative of success that had the audience enthralled. And then, as he began to present his key financial slides, I activated the Lament configuration. It started subtly. A pie chart flickered, its percentages suddenly not adding up to 100. A line graph showing projected revenue suddenly dipped into an impossible negative value. A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. Julian, ever the pro, tried to joke it off. "Must be a glitch in the presentation software," he said with a practiced chuckle. But then the main screen behind him went black for a second before flashing to life again. It was no longer his slideshow. It was a curated selection of his own secrets. There were copies of the emails detailing the plan to defraud me, with his own damning words highlighted in yellow. There were financial statements showing the flow of money into his Cayman Islands accounts. And finally, there were the encrypted messages with Councilman Vance, their corrupt bargain laid bare for everyone to see. The room erupted. Journalists scrambled for their phones. Investors shot to their feet shouting, Julian stood frozen at the podium, his face a pale mask of sheer, unadulterated terror. The elegant, intimidating facade shattered completely, revealing the hollow, frightened man beneath. He looked out at the sea of furious, betrayed faces, his eyes wide with the realization that his world was ending in a very public, very final inferno. His gaze swept the room and then somehow found mine in the very last row. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I simply held his stare, my expression one of cold, final judgment. In that single silent exchange he understood everything. He knew it was me. He knew the ghost had finally come to collect. Security rushed the stage, but it wasn't to protect him. It was to contain him. The screens went dark, but the damage was irrevocable. As chaos swirled around me, I stood and walked out of the ballroom, the sounds of a collapsing empire fading behind me. I stepped out onto Columbus Circle, the bright afternoon sun a stark contrast to the darkness I had just unleashed. The city's noise was a welcome, ordinary symphony. The weight I had carried for years was gone, replaced by a quiet, steady calm. The revenge was complete not because I had destroyed a man but because I had reclaimed myself. I had taken the narrative he stole and rewritten the ending. I walked away not toward a new life but into my own, finally free. He thought he was untouchable, a king in a glass castle built on my broken trust. I watched from the shadows as he accepted the Innovator of the Year award, his smile a weapon that had once disarmed me. The screen behind him glowed with the logo of Ethelgard Solutions, a company whose code was written with my fingerprints, whose very soul was carved from my late-night epiphanies and desperate coffee-fueled breakthroughs. And he stood there, Julian Croft, my former partner, my former friend, accepting accolades for a stolen empire. The MC joked about his vision, and the black-tie crowd laughed, a wave of adulation for a ghost. My ghost. He didn't just steal my company, he buried me in a legal grave, smearing my name until I was unhireable, a paranoid wreck staring at a ceiling that seemed to shrink every night. He took everything, my life's work, my reputation, my future, and left me with nothing but the cold, sharpening stone of rage. But he made one fatal error. He forgot that the architect of his kingdom still had the blueprints. And that was the moment I knew. The real revenge begins now. The rain in New York City that night had a relentless, cleansing quality, as if the sky itself was trying to wash the grime of my past from the gleaming surfaces of the skyscrapers. I stood under the awning of a closed bodega, the neon sign from a dive bar across the street painting the wet asphalt in streaks of sickly pink and electric blue. Water cascaded from gargoyles and overflowed gutters, 1,000 tiny waterfalls in a canyon of steel and glass. My reflection in the dark window was a ghost, hollow cheeks, eyes that held too much knowledge, a mouth set in a line of grim resolve. The man I saw wasn't the bright-eyed coder who had walked into a shared WeWork office 7 years ago, buzzing with ideas and a belief in the power of partnership. That man had been systematically dismantled, piece by piece, by the one person I'd called a brother. Julian Croft. The name was a brand now, synonymous with success and ruthless efficiency. To me it was the epitaph on my own professional tombstone. The memory of our final meeting in his newly acquired high-rise office was a fresh wound, the panoramic views of Central Park a mocking backdrop to my annihilation. "It's not personal, Elias," he had said, his voice smooth as polished stone, his back to me as he looked out over the city he now believed he owned. "It's evolution. The idea outgrew you. I'm just shepherding it to its full potential." He'd offered me a severance package that was an insult wrapped in legal jargon, a pittance to buy my silence and my exit. When I refused, when I threatened to expose him, the knives came out. A fabricated paper trail suggesting I'd been siphoning funds, a whispered campaign to our investors about my unstable mental state and addiction issues, a sudden, brutal lawsuit that drained my savings and isolated me from everyone we knew. He was elegant in his destruction, a surgeon of ruin. For a year I vanished. I let him believe I had broken, that I was languishing in some anonymous obscurity. I took a room in a pre-war building in Washington Heights where the steam radiators hissed like angry serpents and the view was a brick wall. I became a ghost in the machine, living off freelance coding jobs under a pseudonym, my existence pared down to the bare essentials. A powerful laptop, a secure internet connection, and the cold, patient fire of my purpose. My plan was not born of hot-headed impulse but of glacial calculation. I knew I couldn't beat him in a courtroom. his resources were bottomless, his lawyers were pit vipers in tailored suits. I had to beat him at his own game. In the shadows on the battlefield he thought he commanded information. I began the slow, meticulous work of mapping his digital empire. I knew the backdoors of the Ethelgard system because I had built them, little Easter eggs and forgotten pathways I'd coded in during the early days, never imagining they'd become the weapons of my resurrection. Night after night, I navigated the labyrinth of his servers, a silent predator in the stream of ones and zeros. I wasn't there to crash his systems or launch a noisy, destructive hack. I was there to learn. I copied financial records, encrypted emails, private meeting transcripts, and the logs of his personal calendar. I became his silent shadow, his unseen witness. I learned about his mistress, a sleek gallery owner in Chelsea he visited every Thursday evening. I learned about his secret negotiations to sell Ethelgard to a shadowy private equity firm, a move that would betray the very investors he'd sworn loyalty to. I learned about the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, the carefully constructed webs of shell companies designed to hide assets and avoid taxes. Each piece of information was a bullet and I was patiently loading a magazine. My first move was subtle, a single stone cast into the still pond of his life to watch the ripples. Using a secure, untraceable number, I sent a single anonymous text to his wife, Eleanor. It contained no message, only a date, a time, and the address of the Chelsea gallery. The following Thursday, I watched from a coffee shop down the street as Eleanor's sleek town car pulled up. She emerged, a vision of waspish composure in a camel hair coat, and walked inside. 20 minutes later, chaos erupted. Julian's car screeched to a halt, and he practically fell out of the passenger seat, his face a mask of uncharacteristic panic. I couldn't hear the argument, but I saw the shape of it through the gallery's large windows. The sharp gestures, the stunned humiliation on the mistress's face, the cold, controlled fury on Eleanor's. It was a small tear in the fabric of his perfectly curated world, a hint of the unraveling to come. He showed up to a tech conference the next day looking haggard, the first public crack in his polished armor. The business press, ever hungry for a narrative, noted his strained appearance. My satisfaction was a quiet, cold thing. This was merely the proof of concept. The real psychological warfare was about to begin. I started a campaign of subtle gaslighting, designed to make him question his own sanity. I would change minor details in his schedule, moving a lunch reservation by 15 minutes, canceling a car service only to reinstate it an hour later. I had access to his home automation system and I would lower the thermostat by a single degree in the middle of the night, or turn on a light in a room he'd just left. I became the ghost in his machine, the whisper of doubt in his ear. He began to look over his shoulder, his cool confidence giving way to a flicker of paranoia. I watched it all through the camera on his laptop, seeing the faint lines of stress deepen around his eyes, the way he would suddenly stop and listen, as if he could sense my presence in the hum of his computer.